Hello and welcome back. I'm excited to actually have you in this particular video as we'll look at creating dependencies within Microsoft Project. So when you're creating dependencies, you are simply setting up a logical relationship where one function depends on another or a task depends on another in order for it to actually get to be completed, or the initiation of that particular task depends on a predecessor task or function. So with that, let's look at what we can achieve within Microsoft Project. Now we have IT system deployment over here, and we can go about creating various tasks in here. And we can see already that going live is dependent upon testing, and testing is dependent upon system setup, which is also dependent upon requirements gathering. So if we went and opened these up, you'd also be able to see that there are other tasks in here that depend on their predecessor tasks. For example, if we wanted to create those dependencies in this particular project, all we've got to do is to go to, let us say in this case, stakeholder interview and current system documentation. We could select these two like so. And from the task tab, we have this option that allows us to link these two tasks. And once we link them, you would notice that in my predecessor column, I have a 3 over here. Now I'll explain how that actually comes to be. But if I simply went and clicked elsewhere, went back on this part, there is this down arrow over here. And when I click on that, notice that it has selected on this list of tasks 3, which is stakeholder interview. And if you look at my task ID over here, just quickly move this aside. Does this move? Okay, it appears it doesn't want to move. All right, but if you look closely at my task ID, you'd see that 3 is where the stakeholder interviews actually is, meaning for current system documentation to be done, 3 must have been concluded. And this is where working with dependencies actually becomes very important for the rest of our teams. Now, if you look also in your Gantt chart, you'll be able to see that there is a relationship that has been created over there. So there is that dependency that has been stated, and we can see the arrow over there denoting that the third task or ID task number 3 must be completed before ID task number 4 is initiated. And if we wanted to, we could then go ahead and create dependencies for the rest of the tasks that we have over here. So we could simply go, let's say, to this task over here. And this is the procurement of our hardware. So over here, we could say, okay, procurement of hardware cannot start until requirements approval is done. Because in the requirements approval, this is where we've got everything specified and we've now been granted the go ahead to actually begin building up the system. So if we go and select that over here, that will also take into consideration the fact that there must be requirements approval over there. Same thing with system setup. System setup cannot start up until requirements approval is also done. So we could go over there and select requirements approval. These are things that we simply want to do and make sure that everything is in line. And if we wanted to, we could even go and select other dependencies so that we have everything as clear as possible from our Gantt chart on our right hand side over there. So one thing you'd continue doing in this kind of a setup is to simply go ahead and select all the areas where dependencies have to exist and link those to indicate the various dependencies that exist between those tasks. And this simply helps you to keep track of the various tasks that you're performing and making sure that everything is perfectly outlined within this particular environment. Now, one important thing you'd like to do once you've done that is to change these tasks from the manual scheduling to auto scheduling. For example, in this case, I'll simply go ahead and select that portion over there and select auto schedule. This will simply show me that these tasks would simply follow that sequence as one task is completed. Now, there's another important part that actually plays into the aspect of dependencies when it comes to the time of us creating dependencies within Microsoft Project, and that is the different types of dependencies that actually exist. What this actually means is that we have different forms. If I could use this section over here, we have one that is known as FS. Now, FS simply stands for finish before start. All right. So we have finish over here. Okay. Before start. Oops. All right. Now, this simply means that if we have a task such as, let us take, for example, security hardening. All right. Security hardening, according to dependencies, is going to be something that will happen once tasks ID 11 is triggered or completed, in other words. And you could see that ID 11 over here is the predecessor to security hardening. So application installation or install application must happen. And once that is finished, then security hardening can start. That's what FS stands for. Apart from FS, we have SS, which stands for start to start. So this is start to start, which simply states that if we have two tasks, task A and task B, task A will actually have to initiate. It has to start in order for task B to start. That's what it simply means. So task B, in other words, cannot start until task A has started. And apart from that one, we have FF, or finish to finish. Now, this is simply signifying that a particular task, all right, such as what we saw with A and B, is that task B cannot finish up until task A has finished. And finally, we have SF, all right. Now, SF is start to finish. Start to finish in this case, it simply means that task B in this particular case cannot finish until task A starts. This one feels a little bit backward, but these are the different types of dependencies that you actually encounter as you continue working on different types of projects. And in this particular case, we could illustrate that within Microsoft Project. For example, by going to unit testing. So if we selected unit testing over here, we've got the predecessor section. Unit testing cannot start up until security hardening has been done. So select security hardening over there. But once we have that in place, yes, we've got the dependencies set up. 14 cannot execute up until 12 is executed. So we can go and set this up from the menu in this particular area. Now you would see that from here, when you look at predecessors, we can see that 12 is the ID for security hardening, and we can see security hardening over there, and we can see that this is set to finish to start. So in this particular case, security hardening has to finish in order for unit testing to start. There we have FS, but we have options to also change and manipulate that based on what exactly we'd like to see within our environment, as well as add any days or lag that may exist between those two tasks. But that is it, my friend, in terms of how you can create dependencies and how you can even manipulate them once you have them set up within your environment. And if you go to your Gantt chart, double-clicking on any of those dependencies, you actually have the ability to begin changing color schemes over here. So you can make changes as you desire and just make sure that everything that is in there is represented to your liking. And just make sure that everything is visible, which is very important as you work in this area. But that is how you'd go about creating dependencies within Microsoft Project. And that's it for now. I'll see you in the next one.